I have another little prose piece I want to read to you now. After having been out on the Pacific, working on tanker and living in Japan, I lived in Japan for a total of 10 years. And then having the great opportunity granted by my friendship with Gary Holthouse over a number of years, I got to Alaska to do little errands for the Alaska Humanities Council and managed to see a lot of what Alaska was beyond the end of the road. So I was called on to come up with some kind of a little kind of dedication or sentence, or what the heck was it? A statement for the Asian Pacific Bioregional Project, which was supposed to include the West Coast of the Hawaiian Islands and Guam, where the United States has no business anyway, but call it the Eastern Pacific. I call this with wild surmise. Call it the Eastern Pacific, or the western edge of North America. This territory reaches from the desert mountains and Cardon down in Baja, up northwest past Vancouver Island, past Haida Gwaii, the Sitka spruce forests of southern Alaska, the Mount St. Elias Range, glaciers and beyond, across the Aleutian arc of islands and out to the dateline. And then there's the mid-Pacific, the Hawaiian Islands, the further Pacific Islands under temporary U.S. governing. And on the North American continent, it's all west of the Great Basin. It's west of the ridgeline of the Sierra, Cascade Granite, and the volcanoes, on down to the benign Pacific slope with its many ocean-bound rivers, great forests, grasslands, and summer mountain snowfields. The salmon is the traveler that binds it together, weaving the many threads of streams together with the deeps of the North Pacific. Humpbacked whale that feed on herring in the summer in Sitka Sound will calve in the warm waters off Hawaii. The albacore and the tuna cruise south through all the island realms. Hawaii is a remarkable human mix, and Alaska too. Alaska still has dozens of Russian Orthodox chapels and a memory of imported reindeer herding experiments from Finland. There are Aleut commercial fishermen who were interned in Japan during World War II and who still speak a little of that language. And in the Unalaska library, a few books left from Russian times where there was an early Aleut literacy, and people wrote the Aleut language in a well-adapted Cyrillic script. The Protestant missionaries put an end to that, and for half a century, the Aleuts totally lost their literacy and had to regain it. Meanwhile, one more thing here. Fort Yukon was the farthest westward reach of the Hudson Bay Company, and Russian fur traders pushing east came within a few hundred miles at that same era. This was one when Europe almost completely encircled the circumpolar north. And now, right now, Texas oil men are working on the giant platforms that go out for oil in the Chukchi Sea. Meanwhile, in Seattle and in San Francisco, anybody can get a traditional Polynesian-style geometric tattoo, which are often seen among Hawaiian men, a sign of national pride. The whole West Coast, with its ethnic and racial crossovers, its tolerance of difference, keeps on inventing a new trans-Pacific regional culture of backpacking, tea ceremony, varietal wines, anime movies, computer programming, zazen, organic vegetables, grilled salmon, and Burning Man. What can we look forward to? East Asian Hispanics? Anglo Raven Clan Confucianists? One can only hope that the spirits of Douglas fir and red cedar and live oak and manzanita, and especially salmon, will guide us past gridlock and smog to a new culture of the far, far west and the vast Pacific. The Pacific, which on average is 1 mile deep. True. Little poem. Living on the western edge of Turtle Island, in the natural nations of Ish, Cascadia, Shasta, Tulare, and beyond, whose people are native, Euro, African, Asian, Mezzo, Mestizo, Pacific, and Nuevo Americans, Turtle Islanders, where the dominant language is still Americano in the Homo sapiens year of 50,000. That's right now. The first snow peak I ever managed to climb was Mount St. Helens. My little latest book of poetry came out in 2004, called Danger on Peaks, has a picture on the front cover of the current post-eruption Mount St. Helens, lost 1,000 feet, and on the back cover, a photograph that I took in 1945 of pre-eruption Mount St. Helens. The poems in Nature and Peaks, the poems in Danger on Peaks start with Mount St. Helens and end with Bamiyan and the World Trade Center explosions. I'll just read, though, a couple of little things. Mount St. Helens summit was smooth and broad, a place to nod, sit, write, watch what's higher in the sky, do a little dance. Whatever the numbers say, snow peaks are always far higher than the highest airplane ever gets. So I made my petition to the shapely mountain, please help this life. And when I tried to look over and down to the world below, there was nothing there. Atomic dawn. The day I first climbed Mount St. Helens was August 13th, 1945. Spirit Lake was far from the cities of the valley. News came slow. Though the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima August 6th, and the second dropped on Nagasaki August 9th, photographs did not appear in the Portland Oregonian until August 12th. Those papers must have been driven into Spirit Lake on the 13th. Early on the morning of the 14th, I walked over to the lodge to check the bulletin board. Whole pages of the paper were pinned up, photos of a blasted city from the air. Estimates of 150,000 people dead in Hiroshima alone, and an American scientist quoted as saying, "Nothing will grow there again for 70 years. The morning sun on my shoulders, the fir forests smell, the big tree shadows, feet in thin moccasins feeling the ground, and my heart still one with the snow peak mountain at my back. Horrified, blaming scientists and politicians and the governments of the world I swore a vow to myself, something like, by the purity and beauty and permanence of Mount St. Helens, I will fight against this cruel, destructive power and those who would seek to use it all my life. I did go to Hiroshima in 1962. It's doing quite well. And that was part of how one has to readapt or readjust one's thinking as to what's really happening and what's really going on. Just as the studies of post-eruption Mount St. Helens indicate a remarkable resurgence of biological floristic, in this case diversity, right in the areas where huge quantities of gravel and mud avalanched down. It's worth thinking about. It's worth looking at. So my thought, looking at the old farmstead place that I grew up out north of Lake City, which is now inside the city limits, all of that cut over land of stumps and small trees has been parceled up with hundreds of little houses and dozens of roads going this way and that way. And the Doug fir trees and the cedar trees are getting really big. So much bigger that I can't recognize the landscape and I can't see the distant hill. So I was thinking, this is ironic. The human beings are flourishing and the Doug fir are too. I hope that they can, I hope the Doug fir holds its own. But with a certain amount of ecological conscience, you have to also note that the flora, the big trees of the Northwest, really are extremely resilient. Those forests are coming back, or will when you give them a chance. But the wildlife, especially the larger animals, are not going to come back as long as there's that many sidewalks and houses and garages and cars and cats and dogs. So getting a whole ecology back together again is part of what sustainability really means. And that you're not going to get around Lake City for a long time. Where I live, we have to watch out for bears and cougars. People lose their dogs. Well, I'm going to read a few new poems that are not yet published to close this with tonight, and then we're going to have a chance for questions and answers a bit. Recent poems. Why California will never be like Tuscany. My late wife Carol and I traveled across Northern California in 2004. It was a wonderful place, although clearly it had been radically deforested, probably in Roman times. They didn't even notice that. There must have been huge oaks and pines, cedars, maybe madrone, in Tuscany and Umbria long ago. A few centuries after the wood was gone, they began to build with stone. Brick and stone farmhouses, solid, fireproof, steel shutters and doors. But farming changed. 60,000 vacant, solid, fireproof Italian farmhouses on the market in 1970, scattered across the land, and 60,000 affluent foreigners to fix them, learn to cook, and write a book. But in California, the houses are all wood. Roads pushed through, sewers dug, lines laid underground, hundreds of thousands made of strand board, sheetrock, plaster. They won't be here 200 years from now. They'll burn or rot. No, handsome, solid second homes for 1,000-year later wealthy Melanesians or Inuit, Bohemian artists and writers. but oak and pine will still be here. That's okay. Stories in the night. In native California, the winter is the prime storytelling season. That may well be true up here, too. This is in a very different vein. Yesterday, I was working most of the day with a breakdown in the system. Generator 1, generator 2, old phased-out generator 3, the battery array, the big trace inverter, the solar panels had all stopped. Cold early morning in the dark. Back to the old days. Kerosene lamp, candles. The wood stoves always work. The backup generator, the number 3 generator, a Honda, the cycle's wrong, tricking the inverter relay that starts the bulk charge. Big green Onan, fueled by propane, wouldn't start. One time turned out there was a clogged air cleaner. Oil drops blow back up from deep inside. I try to remember machinery can always be fixed, but be ready to give up the plans that were made for that day. Go back to the manual. Call up friends who know more than you do. Make some tea. Relax with your tools and your problems. Start enjoying the day. I'm not done yet. Come on, you guys, you already knew that. The first 15 years we lived here, it was kerosene lamps. Heavy tile roof in the shade of a huge pre-contact black oak. Sherry, Siegfried's longtime woman friend and partner, is due at any time with a 9-ton truck of 3/4-inch crushed rock. Wet dirt every winter eats up gravel. Keeping a few hard roads for drenching winter rains and melting snow takes planning. You have to ditch them too. In 1962, going all through Kyushu with Joanne, walked around Hiroshima. Busy streets and coffee shops, green, leafy trees and gardens, a lively place. But at Mount Aso, the great caldera, 50 miles in diameter, at the center of the island, saw sightseers from Nagasaki with those twisted, shiny, scarred, burned faces of survivors from those days. And then I read Barefoot Gen, the graphic novel of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. It's available in English, 2 volumes. What got to me about the bomb was too much power. And then temptation there to be the first, to be the first emperor of the world, yet to be done. So change our course around, or there we might head. I could never be a Muslim, a Christian, or a Jew, because the 10 Commandments fall short of moral rigor. The Bible's "shalt not kill" leaves out the other realms of life. How could that be? What sort of world did they think this is? With no account for all the wriggling feelers and the little fins, the spines, the slimy necks, the eyes shiny in the night, the paw prints in the snow. And that other thing, can't have no other God before me, like profound anxiety of power and jealousy and envy. What sort of God is that, worrying all the time? Plenty of little gods are waiting to begin their practice and learn just who they are. In North India, in the 4th century AD, Some Buddhist tantric teacher lady said, "That God called Yahweh to the West, he's really something. But too bad. He has this nutty thing that he's creator of the world. A delusion that could really set you back." But returning to energy, I'll fix the Onan, give up on number 3, it's too far gone, and next time get a backup generator with a cast iron block and water cooling and a warranty good for centuries. And put in a bunch more panels for the sun. The old-time people here, in their warm earth lodges, 30 feet across, burned pitchy pinewood slivers for their candles, snow after snow, all those centuries before, lodge fire light and pitchy slivers burning. Don't need much light for stories in the night. Thank you. Thank you. One more poem tonight. This is called A Letter to M.A., who lives far away. This is my last poem for tonight, and then we're going to be here for another spell. Dear Melissa, I do remember you. You had curly hair and stood by the stair up there on Quadra Isle with a shy smile. Say hello to your mother, Jean. I don't remember your sister's name, and that's a shame, but I sort of remember her face and natural grace. Not all poetry has to rhyme, but this time I'm writing you back the way you did it. It's to your credit. You got me to write this form, since real poetry is born from a formless place, which is our original face. Zen Buddhists say, in play. So, if this helps you to be a writer, it will please your new friend, Gary Snyder. Thank you.
So Saul is going to start with a few questions while questions from the audience are being gathered. It's likely we will not be able to answer everyone's question, but we will pass the cards on to Gary. So Saul, if you would like to begin.
Okay. Gary, over the last month, there have been just numerous sightings of black bear in Seattle. They've been in parks. Pardon? Did you hear me? Yes. Numerous sightings of black bear in Seattle. They've been in parks, they've been in alleyways, they've been in backyards, they've been on the front page of at least 2 papers. And so I was wondering, you've been a really eloquent spokesman for bear as teacher throughout the ages. And you can't hear me.
Yeah, put the mic away from your mouth a little bit.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Farther away. Farther away. How's that? That's better. Okay.
I can hear you and they can't. That's good.
Okay. You've been an eloquent spokesman for bear as teacher throughout the ages. What do you think Bear wants to say to contemporary Seattle, and what would be an honorable response?
Bears?
To bear.
Bears.
Black bears.
Black bears, yeah, of course. Who knows? Maybe they had grizzlies here. I'm sure they did.
They were black bears, I think.
Okay. California is the grizzly state. That's a very deep question. What do we owe to bears? I think we need to play music to them. I'm not kidding, but I'll say it because it's funny anyway. The question is, and I've heard this raised before, we take so much from nature and we take so much from animals. What would they want from us? Now, I didn't say this. Somebody said, who was it? They said, well, what animals especially really want from us is more of our music, because they think we are really cute and that we're really good musicians. And they would, if given half a chance, get right up close with us and listen to music. And I thought, that must be true. And then I came across the fact that the Ainu people of Hokkaido, who do salmon, deer, and bear as a regular thing, always sing songs to their meal, because they say the spirit of the salmon or the spirit of the bear is hanging around to get the song that will be the trade for their body. And then one night I was walking, not night, but late afternoon, early dusk, I was walking back down the trail to my place, off the hill through the pine trees, and as I approached the house, I heard my older stepdaughter playing the piano through the wall. She was doing some classical exercise. And sitting at the base of the wall on the outside was a full-grown cougar, just sitting there. He must have been listening, or she. Finally, when I got within about 40 feet of her, she ran off. Now, this is all just some bits of evidence. In any case, how would you express respect to elders? You would find something that you know will be meaningful to them, and you can do it. I think that's really somewhere getting down to it. Art is a motive of the expression of respect.
Thanks. Well, when you were a lookout 50 plus years ago, sitting on Sourdough and Crater, you were looking out at a sea of peaks and what we now know were healthy glaciers. How does the knowledge of climate change and that change in mountain landscapes affect you? What do you make of it? How do we live with that?
I don't worry about it. Because I've been studying climate fluctuations over the last 200 million years lately. And it probably is the case, really, that our current speed up in climate change is to some degree caused by human activities. But if you look at the fact that there was at one time palm trees growing in Greenland and no glaciers, that was when the planet was what they call normal. And the weather that we're in right now is not planetary normal. We are still in an ice age, strictly speaking. An ice age is defined as any era in which ice at either of the polar caps stays all summer. And in normal planetary times, it's quite a bit warmer, and there is no ice in the summer, in the Arctic summer or the Antarctic summer. Now, is that a good thing? I don't know. We are people, we are creatures, we are animals that come out of the Pleistocene. So maybe we need it to be colder. I'm still thinking about it.
All right. One of the things recently that's informed our work at North Cascades Institute has been Richard Louve's book, Last Child in the Woods, and what he described.
Which book is that?
Richard Louve's book, Last Child in the Woods, and what he describes as nature deficit disorder for kids.
Oh, is that? I don't think I've read that book, but the deficit disorder topic was also that really interesting writer who died in Salt Lake City of cancer about 10 years ago. He wrote a whole book about how if you don't grow up with animals and nature as in your childhood, you're going to be slightly crazy. Yeah.
Well, what advice do you have as a father and grandfather for young parents about the value of getting their kids outside?
Getting a what?
Getting their kids outside.
I think it's absolutely required, but not only should you get your kids outside, they should have tools and they should work. I never go out in the forest without a bag over my shoulder to pick berries, mushrooms, whatever I find in any season. I'm always foraging. I had to bring myself back to that because I realized in cultures that are close to nature and cultures that are also close to the bone, you're always picking stuff up. You're always finding stuff. You're always gathering. And it isn't just observe nature, it's also find things that you can use as you go, and try eating bugs once in a while. Now, maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but also I have a theory that women doing intense shopping in malls is perfectly natural. It's a reflection of their desire to go out gathering wild roots.
In their monoloblonics.
Okay.
I have a good follow-up question then from the audience. Well, sort of a good follow-up question. But serious. Is global consumerism unstoppable, or will environmentalism grow roots deep enough for you to take up the ukulele?
They have big ukulele clubs in Denmark now.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just heard it on the radio.
Do you play the ukulele?
My mother did, and I had one when I was a little kid. Will consumerism come to some kind of an end? That's a cultural thing. We're living in a culture that has a kind of an iconic consumerist mentality. This is not only recognized by virtuous hippies, it's recognized by evangelical Christians. It's recognized by fundamentalist Muslims. Part of the counter spirit of the times. I saw it in India, I saw it in Asia. Part of the counter spirit of the times in some people is a revulsion that they are having a hard time expressing. But it's a revulsion against the image of boundless consumerism that they get from watching American and Japanese television. And what they take to be the excessive sexiness of everybody. That's what's out there in the world. So virtuous hippies and evangelical Christians maybe can sort of make common cause against consumerism.
What do you think will help Turtle Island residents be more cooperative?
Yeah. How do I think?
What will help Turtle Island residents be more cooperative? Yeah.
Poverty.
Now there's an answer to consumerism.
I remember how much people were working together, cooperating with each other, sharing during the Depression. I grew up during the Depression years. 1935, I was 5. 36, 37, 38, I was able to actually see what the family was doing. We were still unemployed, but we were raising cow. We were selling milk. We were selling chickens. My father was splitting cedar shakes from old red cedar stumps that he opened up. And everybody was helping each other out, like old-time farmers. And I see that coming back just a little bit. Now, that's a kind of a drastic way to have to arrive at a spirit of cooperation. But we don't have time to go into actually thinking about and talking about what greater cultural changes might come about and how they might come about. I would suggest seriously, without necessarily going out all the way to evangelical Christianity, that an ethical and spiritual frame of mind and a spirit for enjoying and committing yourself to your own mind, your language, your senses, your own good sense and enjoying each day like it was a haiku takes away the need for so much material belongings.
Will you talk about your idea that symbolically and literally watersheds are the mandalas of our lives?
What? One,
Can you?
just say the last
question.
thing.
Symbolically and literally, watersheds are the mandalas of our lives.
Did I say that?
Someone thinks you did.
I might have. Well,
Do you like the idea?
it's an okay idea. I really enjoy learning watersheds, and I keep learning more in landscapes that I've lived in for years. I become suddenly aware of, oh yeah, that's where that water goes. The lineaments of the land are marked by the flow of the water, except maybe in the Black Rock Desert where it's perfectly flat. Using mandala is a very large metaphor. In a sense, you could say those are the mandalas of the land. They are unarguable, and that's an interesting thing. Like, what is a given drainage basin is unarguable, unlike, say, the borders of King County, which you could change any time, and it would make very little difference. Or most of the boundaries of the states of the United States, especially in the West, which are all just drawn with a ruler. Even John Wesley Powell in the late 19th century was talking about that, saying we must reframe our sense of the American West in terms of its actual watersheds. And if you start thinking in terms of actual watersheds and actual landforms, you can begin to make better decisions about land use policy, city planning, suburban planning, and gardening, all the way down to your micro scale. So it really is worth thinking about. Oddly enough, we don't think about it very much because our lives are dominated nowadays by streets, roads, highways, and automobiles, and you don't have to look to see where the water is unless you really make a point of it. Hey, where's the boundary? This is a hard one. Where's the watershed boundary between the south end of Puget Sound and the Cowlitz River? It is almost completely level through there, but there is a place. So I was driving with a guy who's a kind of a hydrologist down in California in the Great Central Valley. We were driving we were going up Road 101. No, not 101, I'm sorry. It was a County Road A1 on what seemed to me like perfectly flat land from Putah Creek going to Cache Creek, about 10 miles distant. At one point, he slowed his truck down and he said, "We are now on the divide between Putah Creek and Cache Creek." I said, "What?" He said, "Yes, it's right here. It's not very obvious. It's very subtle." So there you are.
Somewhere near Cowlitz. How would you define sustainability?
I wish people would ask that question more. The word sustainable, the term sustainability has become kind of a buzzword. And it can be used, as we have seen, to mean a whole lot of different things. And it can be used to justify, and is being used to justify, policies and decisions that might work for some short term, but don't reach very far. So I would pull back from using it myself, except in terms of natural systems, like a forest or a grasslands or a salt marsh, something that you could define in its own terms as a kind of ecosystem, and then say sustainability means that all of the interacting parts of this particular type of ecosystem will be kept intact. We won't lose any of the parts. Yeah, that's pretty basic. Yeah. Wendell Berry, years ago said, using that same metaphor, and we were talking about environmental work, he said to me, well, Gary, isn't it a basic principle that when you take something apart, you save all the parts? Yeah, because when you put it back together again, you're going to need them all. So that means the spotted owl is not trivial. That means the Delta smelt down in the San Francisco Delta, Sacramento Delta, is not trivial. It means that certain creatures and certain plants that you may have never seen or never thought you wanted to know about might actually be very important to it. Like, there might be some part in your engine that you don't know about and aren't concerned about, but if it goes away, suddenly it doesn't work.
So, Gary, continuing on from your KUOW interview this morning, would you talk a bit more about song and poetry and storytelling?
Oh, thank you for asking that. I've taken the position for a long time now that poetry is a variety of song, and that over time it has become somewhat more divorced from the singing voice and the lyrical presentation, but that is always lurking nearby. And then I quoted this morning Robert Duncan, the poet who was one of my teachers in San Francisco when I was 19, saying that a true poem has to have music and has to have magic. But to be able to understand how poetry is related to song, you have to drop the assumptions you may already have about what song is. Song in the larger world and over the larger spread of centuries is not necessarily a highly melodious, musical piece of voice. Chanting is much more common and is also a kind of song. And chanting is done in a song voice. I can't describe what a song voice is, but when you get into chanting, as in liturgical chanting, and that makes me think of the Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, or Buddhist chanting, which we all do. It puts the sensation of what you're doing and hearing in a different level. So poetry comes out of something like that, I think. But so does storytelling. The storytelling of, say, classical Greek times, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which were oral stories, apparently, for several centuries before being written down, are in hexameters. They're in a poetic line, probably sung with some kind of musical accompaniment or chanted with some kind of a musical accompaniment. And then, of course, lyric poetry, the early Greek lyric poems, which are shorter, were sung with a lyre, a stringed instrument. In Japan, the tradition of long narrative poems called Naga-uta and Ko-uta, which are never heard in this country and they haven't been even translated yet, are always sung or chanted with the accompaniment of a stringed instrument called the shamisen, and rhythm with a wooden block, like that. This is what we call ethnopoetics. This is the study of the archaeology and the ethnology of poetry. There's some journals, learned journals on ethnopoetics.
Thank you. We're going to do just a few more questions. I know we're going longer than usual this evening, but that's what's happening. will you talk a bit about the recent publication of the selected letters of Allen Ginsberg and Gary Snyder? The recent publication of your letters and Allen Ginsberg.
Oh, I didn't really want those to be published, but my publisher wanted to publish them. Allen Ginsberg taught me not to be ashamed of anything.
Now that's surprising.
But I have to make a quick proviso to that, which I always have to say if we talk about those letters, and that is, I never had sex with him. Or any of those guys.
Well, it is for Allen.
I'm not there yet. I have to say that because when I moved out of the Pacific Northwest and went to the Bay Area, I suddenly found myself amongst a lot of gay guys who were really good poets and really good artists and musicians and thinkers and so forth. San Francisco has been gay for a long time. I don't know where that comes from, but so they were great teachers to me. But I have to give them credit, all of them. As soon as I made it clear, and I guess I made it clear, that I was really heterosexual, they completely left me alone. And then also accepted me. So there's some lesson in that. So Allen taught me to be shameless in that he was, like one time when we were sharing a little cabin in Berkeley, I came back from class and he was reading my mail. He'd opened up some letters. And I was kind of outraged. I said, Allen, why are you doing that? He said, well, you don't care, do you? You shouldn't care about anything. He said, I just want to know more about you. And then he made the point, which was, if you're going to be a writer, you have to have absolutely no sense of privacy. You shouldn't try to hold anything back, and you should assume that whatever you do is going to come out sooner or later. And you can't keep any secrets. Well, that was a good lesson. And then Allen went on to say, and then once you understand that you can't keep any secrets, don't let that stop you from doing bad things. Well, that wasn't what I was thinking about when we were preparing the book of the letters between Allen and me. I was mostly thinking that, oh my gosh, I looked at a few of those letters, I said, I sound like some kind of pokey Buddhist school teacher. And I'm always lecturing Allen. And then I looked at it again, it's not quite that bad. But most of it is, what's interesting or not interesting about it is that they were very normal conversations about real things that you have to do in the real world. Decisions about land use, decisions about tools. Allen, as you might get from some of these letters and from some of his other writings, was a very hard-headed, practical, sane, intelligent person. He just didn't want to show it.
I love this question. What word would you use to describe your legacy as Jaffe Ryder?
Well, that's not me.
Well,
It's not me. I was just the model for the character Jaffe Ryder, and in small part. And there are things there in the novel. It's a novel. You got to give Jack credit. It's not journalism. It's fiction. A good part of it's fiction. And some of the things that people think we or I might have done are just part of the story. So, what legacy? I hope a sense of humor.
there you go. So just a couple more. Will you please talk about the idea of wild mind?
You're asking me questions that I love to answer, but they take a long time. Okay. I really would like to get the definition of the word wild across. It means self-managing. What is a wild animal? It's an animal that does not need instructions from human beings, nor does it need to have food put out for it, nor does it need to get shots. Wild plants are plants that are self-propagating. Wild nature is self-managing and self-propagating and has its own direction. And it's too complicated, usually, for us to understand. What is your body? Your body is a wild system that manages itself. You don't have to tell yourself to breathe so many times a minute. You don't have to issue instructions to your stomach to digest the food you just ate. The autonomic nervous system, let's be grateful for it. It runs the show. And your ego just sits up in this little tower at the top of the crane. And, thinks it's running things. But wild mind is the mind that you can't predict. And we all have a wild mind. It's called the imagination and the unconscious and the dream mind. But the truth is also, none of us know what our next thought is going to be. You could have a completely surprising thought anytime that you weren't counting on having. And that's part of the quality of the wild, which is that it takes care of itself and it goes its own direction, and yet it somehow manages to know where it's going. To cut it quick to the point, the mind of art is part of wild mind. Cultivated mind grows in straight rows and could be accounting or bookkeeping. Wild mind is on the other side of the fence and is a lot of different bugs and birds. And that's where art is, on that side of the fence. But you need both. It's not like one is necessarily can be discarded and only the other to be lived by. And this is what I have said, to kids in school. Learn good English, and then also be willing to break the rules. So, if I go in as a poet in the schools, I say, today I want you to write a poem that is a lie with bad English. Oh, boy. They have a lot of fun doing that. Then you also have to say, but listen to your teacher when she says, this is good grammar, this is bad grammar. You need to be able to do both. That's true of almost everything.
Saul, you want to wrap things up?
No, I don't want to wrap things up, but
Okay.
But I will ask a last question. Gary, what gives you hope? What gives you hope?
Every day.